and welcome to The Game Changers. I'm Sue Anstis, and this is the podcast where you'll hear from trailblazers in women's sport. Firstly, a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who are kindly supporting The Game Changers through the National Lottery. Along with game-changing women in sport, I'm also talking to male allies, and my guest today is having a huge impact on the visibility of women's sport. Johnathan Licht is the Managing Director of Sky Sports. He originally joined Sky back in 1998 after starting his career at Eurosport. He was appointed Managing Director for Sky Sports in 2021 and is leading the business into its fourth decade of operation. During his career at Sky, Johnathan's overseen a number of significant initiatives that have made a massive impact on the profile of women's sport, especially in cricket, netball and football. So Johnathan, with that in mind, can I start by setting the scene a little for women's sport at Sky today? What are the kind of key sports rights and partnerships that you have in place at the moment?
Hi Sue, thank you for having me. I always got to be careful in my role when I start getting into listing things that I don't miss out anything, whether that's sports, whether that's partners, whether that's people. So I'm very careful. So I get my apologies out there early. But look, we're sort of very happy and proud to say that the sort of our list of priority partners is very extensive and in women's sports. And we kind of think of our sports more and more as our kind of channels are lined up in our verticals. So if we kind of go through that and then we can think of, obviously the WSL is one of our more recent deals. We're extremely proud of that, doing what we said we would do to help partner with the sport to really sort of raise the visibility. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that down the line. Cricket, obviously, we've been very long-standing partners with the ECB. Our relationship on women's cricket is 25 years long and hopefully will be many, many years ahead. We're all enjoying the ICC World Cup cricket, if only it was on a bit of a better time. Yeah. But I watched quite a bit of it on Saturday night and was sort of very pleased during my disturbed sleep to see that we sort of managed to get that sort of very dramatic win. And we're sort of keep following it and hopefully going to make the semi-finals coming up later in the week. There's golf, very strong commitment there to the tours, to the majors, to the Solheim Cup, which has been a sort of long-standing staple of Sky Sports. And, in any year, always an absolute highlight for our audiences. Motorsport, watch this space. Hopefully there'll be a bit more to say there.
Oh, that's exciting!
So we're sort of hang fire on that, and then obviously we have the sort of the collection of sports, and netball would be an absolute leader there. Very strong relationship, 15 years long. We just announced a deal with the Suncorp League in Australia, so we'll be covering. I think it's 60 matches. Obviously, lots of the England team play out there, so that's kind of an exciting addition. So I saw WNBA coverage from Super League. So lots of sports, boxing, clearly more and more, there will not, or they would be very unusual for there to be a fight night that will go out on Sky Sports, either domestically or from the US, without a very high profile female fight. So really sort of absolutely intrinsically with everything we're doing and across, the majority of our sports, really, really strong, rightly so, representation and engagement with our sports and our audiences.
You did well there. I think you listed most. I'm very impressed.
Now, I'm worried already. Yeah.
Is that rugby league? There was something you've forgotten.
No, I said rugby league. Don't try and catch me out.
You've worked at Sky for over 17 years. So what changes in women's sport have you witnessed through your career? And I guess how much is women's sport central to the output today in comparison to where you started in the early 2000s?
Yeah. Look, I'll be a bit careful with how I answer that because I think there's been a lot of people that have worked at Sky and at Sky Sports that have been passionate and been advocates for women's sport for a very long time. And I think we have to be very careful because actually it was probably, you used the word up front about pioneers and trailblazers. And those were the people that were really, championing, talking, driving forward at a time when lots of people weren't. So actually to say that we've come a long way, I think you need to be a little bit careful that you're not sort of dismissing a lot of very important and strong work. But I do think, there has been a significant sea change at Sky Sports. Again, I'll be a little bit careful, but in my mind, I can probably see that real sort of fundamental difference over the sort of last 5 to 7 years. And again, I talked about the verticals of the channels. And when we made that change, I think it became a lot clearer what we were and we weren't doing with certain sports. And I think at that point, our desire and our responsibility to better reflect our audiences, to better reflect the sporting landscape was was much more in demand, and how we marketed ourselves, how we promoted ourselves was just a lot sort of more dedicated and central focus. So yeah, as I say, look, we do have very long-standing commitments for women's sport. I think it would be difficult to argue that it was centre, all through our sort of 30-year history. But again, not to dismiss, a lot of work that, and again, these, when I started, one of the people that was most influential at Sky Sports was a lady called Sue Ashworth, who you may know, and she was a real champion for women's sport, and she may have been around the senior table more of a lone voice, but that actually made her voice relatively more important. And and now when you look around the leadership team, there's no debate, there's no question. It's just part of what we do.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask you just quickly, in terms of verticals, just to explain that to an audience that might not be as familiar with
myself
Sky.
As well. But we obviously, hopefully, people are sort of at least loosely familiar with Sky Sports, the proposition and the channels. So we made a change a number of years ago where we went from the numerical lineup of Sky Sports 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where we moved to sort of genre-based, dedicated destinations for certain sports and certain channels. We have a Premier League channel, a football channel, where WSL, SPFL, AFL will sit. We have a cricket channel, golf channel, Formula One, and then we have a couple of sort of catch-all channels where we have a number of sports, and we have a main event channel as well. So those are the verticals. And really in sort of creating those homes, it was the opportunity for fans of a particular sport to say, at any time as a golf fan, I know where to go, rather than thinking, well, is it or isn't it going to be on 1, 2, 3 or 4 type thing?
And as a subscription business, clearly fan attitude and engagement is key. You've mentioned the fans there. So how have you seen that change? And have you seen that change in the last 5 to 10 years that we've talked about a shift there?
I think that was part of the reason that we made the change in the lineup. Rather than presenting what we wanted to present, it was really, we had to get a lot closer to what the customer wanted and how they wanted to engage. You need to be very careful that a sports fan doesn't look one particular way. So you've got to be multifaceted. So you've got to be able to sort of serve a super fan, give them very deep insights, keep going with the story, making sure that they can come in and access it whenever they want. And then, as we look to be more accessible and inclusive, and I mean that in kind of sort of sporting terms, we perhaps need to think a little bit differently about how we present our sport and do it in a way where you can not necessarily be getting too deep, too analytical, and do it perhaps in a more sort of broader, entertaining way. And that's something that particularly we're sort of facing into that question and that challenge at the moment. We've obviously all experienced a sort of a pretty unique couple of years where it was a very operational heavy for Sky Sports. We had more sport than we've ever had once it started back, having had no sport for the first time in our careers. And that was really challenging for the teams to deliver that. And there was a kind of a relentless pace about get it on the air, make sure it can happen safely, look after our people, make sure the environments are clean and safe. And getting through that, we're now hopefully, although maybe not fully, we're hopefully a little bit, in a place, okay, how do we move the story forward? How do we broaden our appeal? How do we get in front of more fans? So that's the challenge we're talking about. And, I think people would sort of appreciate and know that we're sort of pretty synonymous with trying to really understand customers, and we are trying to do that, and we really are.
And you talk positively about that kind of shift in who's around the board table and an acceptance of women's sport across the business. But is it still a battle you're fighting in some areas in terms of giving women's sport that exposure and that coverage?
I'd like to think not. I guess that the kind of the slightly different thing for us when we look at the industry, because we're Sky Sports within Sky, and we're there are lots of divisions at Sky. I've been here for a long time, and when you're interfaced with the marketing team or the entertainment team or the legal team or the finance, they didn't necessarily look like the people that were turning up for a Sky Sports meeting. And there was a freshness, there was a modernity, with respect to my colleagues, to the conversations, to the environment. I used to always be more excited to go and have those meetings because they would be a bit different to the ones that we would have with the same group of people in and outside of Sky Sports in the industry. So there's been that dynamic going on. So Sky, I feel like, has kind of pulled us along, as well as the sort of people that have wanted to be on that journey. And I think when you look out in the industry, there've also been people that have been on that journey, but perhaps at different paces, and they'll have their reasons, and so look, from my perspective, whilst I still see lots more to do, I don't feel, and again, I'd be careful as me saying this and let other people say it, I don't feel that there are barriers to the conversations and there are barriers to progress, but clearly more needs to be done and more needs to be done at a pace.
And you're clearly a strong male ally for women's sport, but I know in some cases, and we talked just then, haven't we, about that kind of journey, it can be a journey. So was there a moment for you when you realised the role you could play for women's sport?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. Look, I think that, as you get more senior, clearly I've gone around for a long time saying, it's a real responsibility having a senior, but it's actually true. And because of the interactions that you have outside of your work as well, you do kind of understand that. And, over the years, I certainly won't have claimed to sort of over-indexed on my share of getting involved with school and stuff like that. But I always remember conversations with mothers talking about how they were coming back to netball and how they'd been engaging with netball on Sky, and it's something they could do with their friends, and it was also something they could do with their daughters. And I always thought, that's not a conversation I've had a lot over the last 20 years, but that's really good. I like to have that conversation. Thank goodness I've got something to talk about, because otherwise I'm really struggling. I've got 2 kids. They're a 16-year-old son now, 30-year-old daughter. Didn't play huge amounts of sports growing up. Unfortunately, they inherited my sporting talents, but just didn't even have my enthusiasm for sport. But I remember going with my daughter probably about 6 or 7 years ago, watching her play football on a Sunday morning, and a really sort of great group that she was with, some really good players, some mixed players, but actually it was just being done in a really nice way. The coach was excellent. The environment was good. They got to spend, all the things that I look for in sport, enjoying myself, being part of a team, being social, but actually, playing and trying to score, trying to not to defend, all that. Seeing my daughter sort of running up and down in a Nottingham Forest kit, there was nothing that I've probably enjoyed more than that in my life, I have to say. I'm not sure whether I've answered the question, but there's clearly moments in my life where I can see situations, conversations that didn't exist, in the first 20, 25 years of my life. My mother was a sports fan. She played tennis. She plays golf. We watched a lot of sport together. My sister didn't play sport. The girls I knew when I was younger didn't really play sport that much. And I'm not saying that's representative. That's just my experience. I always found, going around at the weekends, it always used to make me smile when I see people in their sports kits coming from a game on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. It's just something I like to see, because I think it's a real positive influence. And if we can be a part of that, we used to have this phrase, inspiration for participation, without taking ourselves too seriously. If we can be a part of that, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? Kind of bringing it back now, I guess, into my role. There is a responsibility. The fact that I've been around at Sky for a long time means that I understand probably more than a few people how Sky works. So when we are looking at an opportunity in a rights conversation or something, I know how to manage a conversation, not to bring it up as a surprise and say, oh, look, there's a tender next week and we need to bid X number of £1 million, yes or no. That's not going to play very well. But actually to say there's an opportunity that's going to come up, and here's a really good story about why we think it makes a lot of sense, how we can build something, how we can be part of something exciting. We'll come back to you in a couple of months' time. We'll bring our partner along. So that is how I can see my role within Sky now, where actually you can, be part of really creating something significant within sport, because, we feel passionately about it. We think Sky can be a really good partner, and we want to bring those opportunities to the table within Sky.
Sky's obviously been a massive supporter of netball across so many years, and that relationship's really evolved. And from the outside, it may not have felt at the beginning that netball would be a sport that would have appealed to that typical Sky subscriber. So I'm just interested to know why it was a sport that you chose, and then also, I guess, what the secret's been to building that success and that audience for netball.
Yeah, so I think it's probably 16 years now. So I think 2006 was our first partnership with English netball. Again, there was a sport, I think, where we saw an opportunity, because at that time, and unlike the other women's sports that we'd have been involved with, golf, rugby union, cricket, this was predominantly a women's only sport, and that was a point of difference. And I think we felt that was important. I think we have We have felt a challenge of bringing that audience to Sky Sports because they don't expect to go to Sky Sports for netball, or they don't expect to see it on Sky Sports. So that's been something that we've really been working on over the last few years, and how we distribute the content and where we distribute it. But I think, again, it follows the sort of a lot of the same lenses. Why netball? Well, why? Because we felt there was an opportunity for us to bring excellent coverage and do everything that we do for other sports. We thought that there was a willing partner, someone that was open to working with us, someone that was going to commit behind that, and they absolutely have done. We felt there was an opportunity for the sport to grow, and I think we've seen that through the participation figures. We felt there's an opportunity for for the sort of inspiration from elite level performance, and again, we've absolutely seen that. So it was a sport that had and has a lot going for it. Again, because we're long-standing partners, we tend to stick with our partners as long as they're happy to stick with us. So we did a new deal. It's all kind of years go quite quickly, but we're in the second year of our new deal with netball. We showed every game when crowds couldn't be there. We're still showing a hell of a lot of games now. The team do an excellent job. It's produced to a very high quality. Again, we were just walking around the studios on Monday evening here, and at 5:30 we've got teams of people working on live netball. That's there's not too many people that have that kind of level of commitment to sport around the world. But we're absolutely delighted to partner with netball, and again, we want to be part of a growing story.
I realise you can't do everything, but I'm a massive fan of women's rugby and Premier 15s. So my personal question to you is, why has rugby not been a sport you've chosen to support in the way you had those others? And asking for a friend, is that something that might change in the future?
Yeah, look, we sort of get a version of that question around rugby quite a lot, and I'd be very open with you. It's not a question of Sky Sports not choosing rugby. It might be the other way around a little bit. We've shown virtually every form of rugby over the years. We were the home of the World Cup winners in 2014. That was on Sky Sports. We've shown Six Nations, the European Cup, Prem. I'm doing lists again. It's dangerous. I'm going to jump out of that. And we've been part of lots of commercial processes around rugby. We just haven't necessarily been successful. We just renewed our Sanzar deal. It was important for us to stay in the sport because we absolutely respect the sport, the size of the sport, the importance that it has in the UK, the opportunity. So again, look, we absolutely are not out of rugby. We always looking at the opportunity to be in sport. So hopefully those opportunities will come around. Look, rugby's doing a lot, working on its calendar, working on how the women's game fits alongside, where's it played, the venues, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a real opportunity still ahead for rugby, and I absolutely hope there'll be an opportunity for us to certainly look at it or be part of a conversation going forward.
Your relationship with the BBC for both the FAWSL and the 100 has been fantastic to see and hugely powerful in driving those new audiences. We saw that in the Women's Sport Trust recent Visibility Uncovered research. So I just wondered why it was important to you to forge that relationship with a free-to-air broadcaster around women's sport.
Well, again, a couple of answers to that. So firstly, that ultimately the rights holder decides how they want to split the rights, and then the people have got to get comfortable with it. And in both those instances, it was absolutely something that we felt would be beneficial to the partnership if we did it together with the BBC. And I think that's been proven, and we hope that will be continue to be proven. I think there's just a kind of a bit of a change generally at Sky over the years. As kind of again, without wishing to sort of undermine any of the previous strategies or anything, but a maturity to how Sky is operating as a business. That it doesn't all have to be in one place. There is a way that actually you can get the benefits of our platform. Everything that we do around Sky Sports News, everything we're doing in the build-up, everything we're doing on digital, but actually we can complement that by doing something or having the content shown more broadly. There'll be other examples and things that you wouldn't necessarily have expected. And my boss always talks to the 2019 Men's Cricket World Cup final, the fact that we showed that on Channel 4. He always talks about that as a kind of a confidence in our brand, and I was, I don't want to give too much away because everyone sort of talks about university, what a good decision it was. But I wouldn't necessarily have been at the front of the queue saying, let's absolutely do that. And I was like going, well, where were these guys, when we were showing these games at 3 a.m. and England were getting knocked out in the group stages? No one was clamouring for anything then. So there's that internal dialogue. But I think we're sort of more comfortable. We understand the broader benefit. We understand when there's moments of national importance. We understand what we can bring, but we also understand what other people can bring. And, whether it's BBC, whether it's Channel 4, whether it's ITV or whoever it is, there are different things that the partners can bring. And I think what our basic view is, we're open for business. We're open for a conversation. If there's something that is mutually beneficial, we talked about this quite a lot over the years in sports. Something I've talked about is, sport has so often, instinct is to fight and defend rather than think, what's the mutual benefit here? What are the victories for common sense? So, that's kind of how we want to paint ourselves more and more.
I love that. And the collaborative benefit for all, that everybody benefits from that too. Yeah. Can we move on to talk a little bit about social media? I loved it as a recent response on Twitter when someone asked Sky Sports to create a separate account for women's football. And the person handling your social media that day posted, "We're Sky Sports. This is sport. We'll post whatever we like," which I loved.
I think the first response was give that person a pay rise, wasn't it? Because that's the bit that got forwarded on to me. Yeah.
So I wonder whether you're giving your team more freedom to respond in that way on social. It's an interesting space, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, again, I'm very comfortable to say that I'm not the master of all the domains. I've used the word domain there. So that we have an excellent editorial team and an excellent team that are operating authentically in that spaces. And look, again, it's back to this maturity point that the audiences that you engage with, they expect certain things now. They expect an honesty. They expect, so if that's how people are reacting and acting on those platforms, then let's be that. Let's not pretend. Let's not sort of sit behind a very kind of corporate veneer, because people will kind of sit through that. We have that, we have that conversation all the time, whether it's, how we talk in press releases or how we're talking, talk to people how you would expect them to be talked to. Is it a conversation you'd have in a bar or a restaurant or a pub rather than, what you're sitting across the table presenting PowerPoint in? So we encourage our teams. So obviously, again, back to use that word, there is a profile and a responsibility to what we do. So it's not a free-for-all, but we're comfortable, certainly when they're sort of pushing back on sort of certain, attitudes that we just think you've got no place, sort of have never had a place, but certainly don't now, then absolutely go for your lives. Yeah.
And moving on with that, I guess we talk a lot about racism in sport, especially football, and that blocking and reporting followers who post racist comments in the Sky Sports stream. And as part of the Hate Won't Win initiative, you and the BBC stated, if we see it in our social feeds, we will call it out.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether you think Sky Sports could be doing more around misogyny and sexist posts in the stream.
Definitely. It's something we're talking about and something that we're trying. It's deeply, deeply depressing that this is people's everyday reality. Anything that we can be doing to change that situation is something that we want to be a part of. We had a new reporter starting this week. I won't name her, but saw she posted, how proud she was to be, continuing her career and what she'd done and now how this was the next step. And she then posted what the first response is like, oh my, But thankfully, then what comes in is 99% positive behind that, but you just don't need to have that whole piece. It should just go without that kind of bump. So, yeah.
And what do you do in that case then? So, what does can Sky block, or is there anything you can do to take more action to show?
Yeah, there's what we can do and what we are doing, but actually, at the level, the volume of interactions, the amount that people are posting, the amount that's coming back, it is. When I say it's more than a full-time job, it's multiple people's full-time jobs. And I think what we're looking at is, is there tech that can help us in this, but again, that has certain limitations. So look, it's definitely a space that we're active in. And again, it's part of the journey and the story that we want to tell, that, this is not acceptable. We're going to be part of something that's more positive. We're going to be part of something that's going to make a change. and ensure that, let's not make a big deal out of it, because this is just sort of basic standards and expectations that people should have about how they're going about their lives, that they shouldn't have to deal with this nonsense. But again, it's not my reality, but I'm very aware that unfortunately it's a lot of people's realities, and just not acceptable.
And you gave that one instance of the female presenter, but in terms of women presenting and covering male games in all sports, is there less backlash, do you think, from an audience than there used to be in the past?
Look, I can answer that question, but I'll turn it back to you. I have to believe that is absolutely the case. Clearly, there are going to be voices, but the voices that we're trying to ignore, that will always just be out there hating on whatever you're doing. Again, at Sky Sports, we're kind of comfortable that people don't come on social media to tell us we're doing a wonderful job. It'd be nice if they did, but we're kind of over that that's not the case. So you're kind of sort of blocking out that. But we just know with the caliber of people that we're employing, we're fortunate enough to show some of the most significant global sports rights there are. And how we present that, I think, is as good pound for pound as anyone in the world. And that's always been something that we've been very proud of, and how we've evolved the people that are presenting it and making them more representative. I actually think, there aren't questions in my mind about the quality of the people that we're engaging across the board. Everyone that is on Sky Sports is on because they're excellent and they're deserving of that opportunity, and they demonstrate that every time they go on air. But I'd be interested in your take on that.
Well, you've obviously had many women. We've seen fantastic women in front of camera, which we're talking about there in recent years. But in terms of that pipeline of where they come from, I've seen some really quite shocking stats. So I think it's only 10% of students on sports journalism courses are women. So I just wondered, in terms of recruitment and that pipeline of journalists coming through, how you're finding that at the moment, and what you can do, if there is anything you can do to help with that.
I'm happy to talk about that. Again, it's not my day in, day out expertise in what I'm doing, but again, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years looking at the pipeline, looking at how we recruit, where we recruit, things like the language when we're recruiting, the networks that we're using, things that lots of other businesses and companies are doing, and things that people will rightly say that we should have been doing 20, 30 years ago. But we're doing it, and we are seeing the benefit of what we're doing it. I think, again, the example that you give around the journalism qualification, a little bit of a change. And this is something I talked to Mark Alford, who runs Sky Sports News, and Steve Smith, who's our executive director of content. And they were talking about, actually, let's get the people in Sky Sports, then help them get the qualification. And I think that will be a way that we can sort of open ourselves up more, than rather say, let's put the bar a bit higher and then be drawing down potentially, unfortunately, on a smaller pool. So I think that's a difference that we can make to open up those opportunities. So look, we're clearly having some success, and we are bringing more people in to Sky Sports that represent our audiences better than have traditionally done.
Excellent. That's good news. You and I talk a lot about the importance of women working across sport, and I know internally at Sky you've been a big champion for Sky Sports' support of the Women's Sport Collective, so I thank you for that. And the collective's ambition is obviously to create more of a gender equal sports society. So I wonder, are you happy with the gender balance across the whole of a Sky Sports organisation at present?
No, not happy. No, because we're not where we would want to be. Sky as an organisation, we always talk about targets, and whether targets is the right set of behaviours, or whether it's and actually we do have certain targets, but actually really what we're about is having the right culture and inclusive culture. There is not the parity amongst the team, around the leadership table is not as balanced as I would like it to be. Going through the organisation, I would say there's probably more, there's stronger representation. There are no longer areas in Sky Sports where maybe 10 years ago you'd go and there'd be no women. That doesn't exist. But I still think, I know that there's not enough senior representation for women in Sky Sports. And that's something that we will continue to be focused on, and being part of the collective, having the opportunity for our teams to be networked, to show Sky Sports to the industry, to again, it's something I'm very conscious of, that when you say the industry isn't big or it is big, I don't really know what your take on it. Again, it depends where you kind of are in it, but people will have a view on Sky Sports, and Sky Sports is, through one lens, it's kind of been a leader and it's been this, it's been that. But through other lenses, it's kind of been this big beast. And how accessible has it been, and how available has it been? And maybe you had an experience a number of years ago or something, and really, whether that experience was representative, good or bad, let's see. But actually, take the opportunity to engage again with us, understand what we're trying to do and the direction that we're saying. I hope the credentials are there for people that aren't in Sky Sports to see what we're trying to do. And certainly if you're in the building, hopefully it's beyond doubt.
And whilst I am clearly a massive fan of Sky and all you're doing in women's sport, the lack of female representation on the Sky Sports app and the homepage of the website can be frustrating. And I think when I put these questions together, there wasn't a female sports story on the homepage that day. It is much better today, I have checked. But I guess what needs to change for that to change? Because there's only one element, but it's quite a public-facing side, isn't it?
Yeah, no, look, I take that on board, and I do know. I would like to think today we'd be talking about the WSL game that we've got tonight. Obviously, the big story in the world of tennis that broke overnight, the Cricket World Cup. So there will be, but
Six Nations is on there.
Six Nations, okay, good. So we're happy that Six Nations is getting the coverage that it deserves here. So look, I get it. I get the question. It's a challenge that we will always set the team. I think we cover a lot of sport. To be 50-50, to be representative exactly, I think is still quite a journey from where we are. But it doesn't have to be 50-50, it could be 90-10.
I'll take 30.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Well, look, I think we get it, we understand. The challenge is there with our team. I'd like to think that people can see progress. I'd like to think that people can see that, we are committed to women's sport, and that's going to be a big part. Our digital audience is big. Our digital audience, to your point, is actually more male skewed than our linear audience. That is a challenge for us, because actually we talk about younger audiences a lot, and lots of our younger audience, a volume of our younger audience is coming through digital. So again, if that pipeline is being skewed more male, that doesn't bode particularly well for our ability to bring in broader and wider audiences to Sky Sports over the longer term. So look, it's something we're very conscious of. We sort of take that on the chin, and we're always trying to do our best.
And a male audience is not a female,
no, it's not. But sorry,
sport.
When I talk about that, I talk about we've spent a lot of time talking about women's sport. We spend a lot of time at Sky Sports thinking from the female sports fans and the opportunity for us to broaden our appeal, whether that's watching Formula One or watching netball or watching the WSL or the Premier League. For us, we don't really make the distinction, but we want to have more sports fans generally. Yeah.
And I guess, have you ever considered taking bold action or publicly stating that every day you might have 30% of coverage of women's sport on your homepage? Or does that occur to you to almost set something like that to lead the way?
Look, again, we talked a little bit earlier about targets and how that can draw behaviours and change. So look, again, we think about that, we take it on whether that brings we have to serve our audiences, we have to develop our audiences as well and make sure that they're, open and engaging with everything. Again, in volume terms, I would like to think we're offering more women's sport than anyone. Proportionally, I accept that we're not at that level that perhaps our ambition should be.
And I had a really interesting chat with Hugo Monnier on the podcast about the slight dilemma of putting well-known male sports broadcasters on screen to report on women's sport. And whilst it helps with profile and can bring credibility to women's sport, especially in the eyes of other men, it can sometimes mean that those female presenters then get sidelined. I wonder what you think, what the approach would be there.
I'm always very happy to listen to his views on anything. Every time I hear him, I just have this sort of overwhelming feel of jealousy that we don't engage him or we don't have the opportunity to engage him. So look, I understand. I think, again, I think we're sort of comfortable that there's the right balance, that there's the right editorial relevance. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer here. I think you look at the opportunities and you look at the programming, you look at the content, and you think, what is going to be additive to the audience? Who's going to be insightful? Who's going to help you tell the stories? Who's going to bring attention, promotion to what you're doing? So look, I'm I would be comfortable that there's a blend, but also conscious that you don't want to be reducing opportunity. So I absolutely trust our teams that they've got the right mindset to be challenging themselves and thinking about what the right questions and what it is that the audiences are looking for in each circumstance. So I think, again, I'd like to think we kind of get that one right more often than not.
And Hugo, and actually Ian Wright before him, told me how powerful it can be for well-established male presenters and pundits to actively support the lesser-known female colleagues on social media. So retweeting and quote tweeting helps to increase their profiles and confirm their expertise, again, often in the eyes of male sports fans. So is that something you ever discuss with your high-profile male presenters at Sky, or would you encourage them to do more of that?
Look, we absolutely would. I guess there's a bit of a dynamic that we have going on within our team, is that there isn't probably the cross-pollination across the sports because each sport is so busy with its own sports. But football within football, cricket within cricket, I think there's absolutely the respect between all of our talent that cover the sports. They understand that there's a reason why they're at Sky Sports, and that's because they've got a lot to offer. And everything I observe is that the teams more and more than ever get this idea of supporters, collaborative allies, and can see some of the challenges that some of our other colleagues are facing, and are probably more, can be, not always, but are sometimes more confident in the space, carrying a bigger voice in terms of just the numbers of people that are engaging with them, and absolutely, would be looked to be supporting of their colleagues. Absolutely, I see that, and I would definitely encourage it as well.
You're clearly a fantastic male ally for women's sport, but I wonder how you personally keep learning and evolving in this space.
I don't want to overclaim anything at this stage. But what I will be very comfortable saying is I'm open-minded, and I'm absolutely ambitious to take the opportunity. Again, my bosses talk to us and say, what do you want to be famous for as a team? Who wouldn't want to be famous for bringing positive change to sport in this country? Who wouldn't want to be famous for bringing, making sport more accessible, for encouraging more people to engage, to watch, to attend? And kind of when you talk about it like that, it does become a bit of a no-brainer. I am pretty confident in the leadership team at Sky Sports that people are coming about it for the right reasons, because they want to be part of something positive, because they see the opportunity, because it's the right thing for us to be doing. And I can genuinely say it is something that we are talking about almost constantly. What more can we be doing? How can we be supportive? And I know for some people that can be quite difficult to believe, because they say, okay, where's the action? And there is action, but there can always be more action. So, we take it very seriously, personally and collectively, and we see it as a really big opportunity. And we are not going to be taking backward steps. So, I hope people can see that. I hope some people want to be a part of that. And to some of the ground that we've covered, collaborate, partner, engage, come and see us, invite us in. Let's do it all. Let's act collectively as an industry, and let's encourage each other and kind of bring each other along.
Thanks to Johnathan for taking the time to talk to me for the podcast. You can head to our website at fearlesswomen.co.uk to hear more from other male allies, including Ian Wright and Hugo Monnier. As well as listening to all the podcasts on the website, you can also find out more about the Women's Sport Collective, a free network for all women working in sport that's kindly supported by Sky Sports. You can sign up for Changing the Game, our free weekly newsletter, which highlights the developments in women's sport. And there's also more about my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. Thank you once again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers through the National Lottery, and to Sam Walker, who does a great job as our executive producer, along with Rory Alskery on sound production. Finally, thank you to my brilliant colleague, Kate Hannon, who does so much with me at Fearless Women. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook at Sue Anstis. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.